In the early 90s, when I was attending Penn State University, I knew a man named Sandman Archibald Bundeford. Yes, that was his honest-to-God, real-life, on-the-birth certificate, on the driver's license, stitched into his underwear, birth name. I thought the names that celebrities were giving to their children these days were awful, but this kid had a stupid name before stupid names were chic. I always figured his parents were flower children, and named him on some kind of acid trip. In any case, Sandman and I had a freshman composition class together, and would occasionally kill time in the library. He was a nice guy, 17 years old if I remember correctly, mulatto, meaning mixed race, shy but friendly, and always carried around the biggest laptop computer you would ever want to see. At that time, it was pretty impressive to see someone with what was considered to be a portable computer. I would sometimes see him with his nose to the LCD screen, analyzing some code or scrutinizing the pixels off some image he was trying to edit. Sandman hung around with some of the older students who were either interested in or taking classes in computer programming, film, graphic design, which was his current major, and photography, while I gravitated toward the other freshmen in the world literature classes that I took. I was, however, kept in the loop as to the progress of a project that Sandman and his pals were working on. He would talk to me sometimes about this game that he was helping them make. From what I gathered at the time, it was a mixture of text-based horror and point-and-click style dungeon crawler that they were calling Warlock, with an E. He was wildly excited about being involved in this project, and he would almost get giddy when he talked to me about it, grinning stupidly while assuring me that Warlock was going to be the next big thing in gaming. I always humored him, although in reality I thought the whole thing was some sort of pipe dream. There was progress being made, though, as he would sometimes show me bits of what the team had accomplished thus far. It looked okay, but I didn't quite see how he would achieve the popularity of which he was so sure. The premise was a simple one. Get through a dungeon, collect items, fight baddies, save the princess. You know the drill. The hook, however, was that this was going to be an adults-only game, with digitized photos depicting graphic violence and nudity. The adult theme was the gimmick that would serve as the selling point, getting grown-ups to pick it up and teenagers to lust after it. I guess I really couldn't argue that sex and violence do sell. Sandman's contribution was to help with the digitizing and editing of the photos to be used in the game. Lots of blood and guts and stuff you would see in Fangoria magazine, which Sandman usually had a copy of. He let me, or more accurately, made me borrow a tape to watch one time that he had recorded the favorite bits of movies like Mondo Cane, Faces of Death, and various Italian cannibal films, which is apparently a genre. Pretty sick stuff. Not my cup of tea, but nothing unheard of. For a few weeks, I was hearing lots about Warlock, and how underground gaming was going to break into the mainstream. But gradually, Sandman's excitement seemed to wane. I eventually asked him about the progress of the game, and he said that all he knew was that it was in development. A few days later, I saw him fervently working at his monolith of a laptop again. When I inquired, he stated that the game was getting a graphical overhaul, and he was in the process of digitizing and cleaning up a few new grisly photos. I chuckled and wished him luck. It was later in the month, after spring break, that I met up with Sandman in the library after a statistics class. When he saw me approaching, he let loose the toothiest grin I ever saw from him, and he proudly held up a 3.5-inch floppy disk. He reminded me of Lady Liberty, towering high with her torch in hand. I sat next to him, and he proceeded to tell me that the beta version was playable, and almost ready to shop around to distributors. He opened his laptop case and handed me one of a stack of about a dozen floppies. "Here," he said, "take this home, and let me know what you think." "Sure," I agreed with a chuckle, adding, "I hope my computer has enough juice to run it." After a few days of "Did you play it yet?" from Sandman, I finally got around to checking out what I was told would be the best-selling game of 1992, the year by which they were sure they would have mass distribution. On a Thursday evening at home, I popped the floppy disk into my Packard Bell and booted her up into DOS. The setup ran smoothly and was finished and configured in about 10 minutes. Upon launching the game program, I noticed that the title screen looked fairly professional. Maybe I had underestimated the ragtag band of artists and coders who, according to the startup screen, were calling themselves Tesseract Solutions. More rad misspellings to distinguish themselves as an edgy, forward-thinking upstart. I smirked to myself after reading the all-caps-locked message explaining that this game was not intended for anyone under 18 years of age, despite being created by kids barely that old. I selected New Game and hit Return. A text box popped up telling me that I had to rescue the Queen's handmaidens from a dungeon before some ritual called the Bloodening occurred. Oh man, the Bloodening? Really? This was going to be interesting. I hit Return again and started the game. The interface looked pretty fresh and user-friendly, which was nice. The graphics were nothing to write home about. I noted that the mouse cursor was a blood-soaked arrow and appeared to have a few items in my inventory. I clicked the up arrow, which prompted me to move forward, and came upon a figure in a dark cloak. It was nice to have the option of either entering text commands or clicking with the mouse. The hooded figure gave me a dagger, which was, of course, stained with blood, and I continued on. Not having a list of commands didn't seem to affect my gameplay, as almost every command I used seemed to work. I figured they must have loaded in a lot of variables into the command section, which was a nice touch for those of us who haven't played many text adventures. After coming across a wooden chest and obtaining a spellbook, I learned a lightning spell. I was starting to wonder when I would get to the digitized photos that Sandman had been working on. Eventually, an enemy appeared, and I battled him. The skirmish was uneventful. I took some damage and then defeated the foe. When I killed the enemy, the display area went from showing the dungeon ahead to displaying a crudely digitized photo of a red face I assumed was the enemy after his defeat. It was a strange and somewhat off-putting image. I guess this is where they're going to earn that 18+ rating, I thought to myself. Hitting any key or clicking anywhere seemed to remove the photo and bring the dungeon back. I explored some more and came across a guy in a wizard cloak and hat. He asked me if I was friend or foe. I typed in friend, and he proceeded to call me a liar and engage me in battle. I could tell this game wasn't shooting for any points, intellectually. I attacked him a few times and finished him off with a dagger. I was rewarded again with another picture of a bloody face. The color palette the designers were using didn't really lend itself well to this kind of digital photo display. Through the messes of gray, black, and red pixels, I could tell that the face being shown didn't look anything like the wizard I had just battled. This was a matter of content over form, and the content was simply shock value. After receiving another spell, and a key from the wizard, I continued my search through the corridors of the labyrinth. Honestly, there weren't even that many wrong turns or pitfalls. I guess they just wanted to keep the pace pretty action-packed. I eventually came to a set of iron bars, and used the key I got from the wizard on them. What I saw next caught me off guard. A pixelated image of a topless woman tied down with rope popped up in the display area, accompanied by a text offering to thank me with either a spell or her body. I'll admit, I was more than a little curious to see what would happen if I took her up on the offer of her body. I was a college student without a girlfriend. Give me a break. So, I typed body into the text field, and I was shown another picture of a topless woman, this time not tied up. She was staring at me as seductively as a 4-color block woman could. I admit it was pretty funny, and hey, maybe it would work as a selling point for the game. Maybe there's a market for pornography resembling glitched-out Nintendo games. As for me, I'd just rather look at a Penthouse magazine through a kaleidoscope. After you see the handmaiden's naughty bits, you can just type spell and get the attack anyway. So, my journey continued through the game, as I fought baddies, got items, and rescued handmaidens. For each fight I won, I was rewarded with a new gruesome photo, the spoils of victory. Some of them looked like they were out of a horror magazine or slasher flick. Others were harder to make out, but were slightly more upsetting. I noticed that they didn't even seem to fit the dungeon crawl theme of the game. They looked more like crime scene or emergency room photos. Like I said, not easy to see exactly what was happening in them. I guess Sandman did the best he could with the low resolution and minuscule color palette he had. The pictures of the handmaidens were a little odd to me also. I'm not a prude or anything. I know that some chicks are into bondage, but the women in the pictures all looked kind of frightened or worried. They did not appear at all relieved to see the warlock come to save them, despite their constant offers to ludicrously satisfy his physical needs. Whatever, maybe I'm just not into tied-up girls. I eventually saved a third and final handmaiden, and when I turned around, I was face to face with a new enemy known as the Blood Demon. Well, who else would you expect to hold a ritual called the Bloodening? This was the toughest opponent I had yet faced. All the others up to this point were almost criminally easy. I had the health potion, though, and the items didn't seem to disappear after use. So the only thing that really made the Blood Demon tougher was that he took longer to kill. I wondered later if it was even possible to die in this game. So I handily defeated what turned out to be the final boss of this short game. The game showed me a picture of my slain foe, which looked like some kind of dead raccoon, or turtle, but I was surprised that they actually got an image that wasn't just another human victim from a slasher flick. I was told that I would be receiving a handsome reward. I hit the return key and was compensated for my efforts in the labyrinth by another nude female, who I assumed was the queen, telling me to come hither and collect thy reward. Another tap of the return key brought up a thanks for playing message, and a list of the guys who made the game together. I saw Sandman's name in the special thanks category, and imagined how stupidly proud he must have been. There were one or two other names I thought I recognized, only as friends of Sandman though. Since I beat the game in one night, I was able to talk to Sandman about it the following day in the library. He once again asked me, "Did you play it yet?" And this time, I was finally able to give him the answer he wanted. Of course, he wanted to know what I thought about it, and how blown away I was by it. I didn't really have the heart to tell him that the plot of the game was wafer thin, the characters were all but non-existent, and the gameplay was inane and repetitive. The dialogue was ridiculous, comparable games were offering sound and sometimes music. The sex and violence would probably kill any mainstream release, or that the graphics were barely up to par with other computer releases, and totally eclipsed by Nintendo and Genesis. So instead I told him that it was bitchin', and really fun. I wasn't gonna rain on this guy's parade, and hey, maybe the game would actually get picked up and become popular in some form or another. The fact remained that this group of college kids actually did manage to put together a playable computer game that worked and might even garner some attention. That's more than a lot of young programmers can say. When he asked, I told him that the digitized photos looked really good, and would probably be a lot better as computer technology improved. And he agreed, and continued to talk my ear off about all the work that he and the others at Tesseract had done, and how that this was only the beginning for them. Finally, he had to go to class, and I was spared about having to hear about adjusting the resolution on the in-game photos for the third time. From that point on, his mania seemed to level off, and we got back to talking about things other than Warlock, but several weeks later, it was actually me who brought it up again. I asked what was going on with the video game. He told me that Aaron and Robert, two of the programmers, were just working out minor bugs. Just before the end of the semester, I asked again, and he said that he hadn't been able to get into contact with neither Aaron nor Robert, and others who worked on the project either didn't know or wouldn't say what was going on. I told Sandman that it would probably work out in a few days. Personally, I figured things were going nowhere with the game, or that there was too much adult content in it to get picked up. Over summer break, I was still living back at home with my folks. One day in July, my dad told me to read an article he saw in the paper about some Penn State students that had been arrested, or questioned by the police. I read over the article, and saw a few names that I recognized. I knew them from either the Warlock game credits, or through Sandman, who wasn't mentioned in the paper, as he was still a minor. I told my dad that I knew some of the kids' names, but I didn't know any of them personally. The news story read that Jeffrey Maxwell, Robert Porter, Aaron Alvers, Peter Bodine, Daniel Scrannell, and an unidentified minor had been arrested on suspicion of kidnapping, assault, and burglary in Philadelphia County. I was quite surprised by this and wondered what had happened, as the news article didn't give too much detail. I didn't hear much more about this for a week or so when a news report came on the local station. It elaborated and gave new developments on the PSU student events. Apparently, Jeffrey Maxwell and Daniel Scannell were being questioned and released, while Robert Porter, Aaron Alvers, and Peter Bodine were being held on charges that now included murder and conspiracy to commit murder, along with another man named Jerome Watts. Obviously, this got my attention. Porters, Alvers, and Bodine allegedly traveled from State College, PA to Philadelphia and the Bucks County area at least 3 times between February and May of 1991 and hired prostitutes. The 3 were accused of taking the prostitutes to an empty house and assaulting them, causing bruises, broken ribs, and one of the girls a concussion. The abandoned house, a former residence of Jerome Watts, was also thought to be the site of at least 2 murders committed by Porters and Alvers. Watts, a 34-year-old sanitation worker, had copped a plea deal in return for further evidence on Porters and Alvers. Bodine was still being held on a conspiracy charge. After gathering physical and circumstantial evidence on Porter, police obtained a warrant and allegedly found a shotgun which may have been used in the murders, as well as photographic evidence linking himself, Alvers, and Bodine to the scene of the crimes. There were also several incriminating files on his computer, and some body parts, which appeared to be from small animals hidden in his bedroom walls. The next day, I got a call from Sandman, to whom I can't remember giving my number, but my family was in the phone book. He sounded nervous and almost frantic. He told me that I had to delete that game from my hard drive and shred or burn the disk he gave me. I told him I saw the news and asked him what the hell was going on. Still sounding shaken, he told me that he had no idea where the photos he digitized came from. I swear, I thought they were just from Fangoria or some titty magazines, he choked out. And some of them, I swear to God, some of those were just dead people from special effects in movies. I know, I'd seen them. I told him to calm down and that he had nothing to worry about, that he couldn't have known what he was doing and the police would realize that when he was questioned. He seemed to be settling down a bit, but he said he had more calls to make. I told him that probably wasn't a good idea at this point. He just said, "Yeah," and hung up. That was actually the last time I ever spoke to Sandman. I heard that he transferred from Penn Tech to finish school, and I can't blame him. PSU's campus is a big space, and I'm pretty sure almost everybody would have been eyeing him, as well as other members of Tesseract Solutions. And I never asked him, nor anybody else, about which of the photos in Warlock were from horror movies and titty magazines, and which ones, well, weren't. I didn't want to know, and I still don't want to know. I deleted the game from my hard drive, but I couldn't remember where the disc was. I actually found it not too long ago, and I couldn't resist the temptation to play it through again. Incidentally, it never got picked up for major distribution, if you can believe it. But there must still be a few copies floating around. I remember how silly I thought it was back in school. It didn't seem silly at the time, though, and I kinda wish I hadn't replayed it. I wonder whatever happened to those guys. I know that Jeffrey Maxwell and Dan Scannell got off with extended probation, and Aaron Alvarez and Pete Bodine got served 4 and 6 years respectively. Bobby Porter is still in the penitentiary, I think. I guess in this day and age, it would be easy to find and track them down, and see what they're up to. Seems kinda morbid, though. I do still think about that quirky mulatto kid from freshman comp, though. After all, how hard could it be to track down someone called Sandman Archibald Bundeford?